was late, far past midnight, and I found myself on the last bus of the night. The station was eerily empty, save for a few other souls waiting for their rides, ghosts of the night merely passing through. The wind howled outside, slamming against the station's glass doors, while the dim lights flickered overhead. The bus, a worn-out vehicle that had seen better days, pulled into the station with an unsettling creak. I stepped aboard, glancing around. It was quiet, too quiet. The driver didn't seem to acknowledge my presence, his eyes fixed ahead, as though in a trance. Without another word, I found my seat by the window. The glass was cracked, letting in the cold air, but it didn't bother me. I was used to long, solitary rides, especially at this hour. The engine rumbled to life, and we began our journey down the empty streets. The city seemed dead, all signs of life having been swallowed by the darkness. As the bus moved further away from the station, the world outside became more and more unfamiliar. The streetlights grew sparse, their glow casting long, crooked shadows across the road. Each turn the bus made seemed to take us deeper into some forgotten corner of the city. I glanced around the bus. The other passengers were strange. I hadn't noticed them when I first boarded, but now I saw them sitting in the dim light of the bus, each one seemingly lost in their own thoughts. There were 3 people, a man sitting by the window across from me, a woman in the back who appeared to be sleeping, and a man at the front, next to the driver, whose face was obscured by the shadows. The more I stared at them, the more I realized that something was wrong. There was no sound, no murmur of conversation, no shuffle of papers or rustle of clothes. They were eerily still, like mannequins frozen in time. The only thing that moved was the bus itself, slowly, almost reluctantly, eating up the miles. As the minutes ticked by, a growing unease gnawed at my stomach. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the passing scenery, but the streets outside seemed to be slipping away, replaced by an endless stretch of road that looked strangely unfamiliar. The buildings on either side began to blur together, their shapes becoming more abstract, distorted in the dim light. Suddenly, the bus jerked as if it had hit something. I gripped the seat, startled, but the other passengers didn't seem to react. Not a single one of them moved, not even to glance around. I looked to the front of the bus. The driver's hands were still firmly on the wheel, but his eyes were no longer fixed on the road. He was staring straight ahead, unblinking as if in a trance. I turned back to the window, trying to calm myself. The road was dark now, too dark. There were no more streetlights, no more signs of life. I couldn't even make out the outlines of the buildings anymore. We were driving through an empty void. I was beginning to feel the weight of isolation, the kind that settled deep into your bones. There was no escape. The city outside had disappeared, and I was trapped in a hollow world that existed only within the confines of this bus. Then, something strange happened. The woman in the back of the bus stirred. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes blinking as if waking from a deep sleep. She glanced around, and for the first time, her gaze met mine. A chill ran down my spine as she looked at me, her eyes empty, hollow, like she wasn't really seeing me at all. I quickly turned away, trying to shake off the feeling of dread creeping over me. I shifted in my seat, hoping to distract myself, but the atmosphere in the bus was suffocating, oppressive. The air felt thick, heavy with a sense of unease, that I couldn't shake. I looked back at the man across from me. He was staring straight ahead, his face pale and drawn, his eyes vacant. I couldn't understand why he looked so familiar. It was as though I had seen him before, in a dream or some long-forgotten memory. But where? The bus continued to roll down the darkened road, each turn taking us further away from anything I recognized. I tried to focus on the details, the sound of the tires on the road, the rhythmic hum of the engine, but everything felt off. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional flicker of the bus's overhead lights. As I looked out the window again, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure was standing on the side of the road, just outside the reach of the bus's headlights. It was tall, cloaked in shadows, with no discernible features. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the figure, unable to look away. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath becoming shallow as the bus continued its relentless journey. The figure remained at the side of the road, watching us pass. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't make out any details. It was as if it was made of darkness itself, a silhouette against the night. I turned to the driver, hoping for some reassurance, but he was still staring ahead, unmoving. I wanted to scream, to ask him where we were going, but the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed, trapped in a reality that was slipping away from me with every passing second. I looked back at the figure outside the bus. It was closer now, standing just beside the window. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized it was looking directly at me. The emptiness in its eyes mirrored the hollow feeling growing inside me. I turned away quickly, my breath coming in sharp gasps, but it was too late. The bus lurched again, this time with more force. The lights flickered once more, and for a split second, everything went pitch black. I felt the bus sway, as if it was about to tip over, but then, just as suddenly as it had started, the darkness faded and the lights flickered back on. We were still moving, but everything outside the window was gone. There was no road, no city, just darkness and that figure standing in the middle of the road watching me. And that was when I realized I was no longer on the bus. The bus kept moving forward, but I could no longer tell if we were actually moving or if the world around us had simply stopped. The sound of the engine was a faint hum in the background, almost like it didn't belong to this place anymore. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I couldn't shake the image of that shadowy figure standing outside the window, watching us pass. I tried to focus, tried to make sense of what was happening, but it was as if the rules of reality had been twisted. The darkness outside had become all-consuming. There were no buildings, no trees, no road, just an endless void. The bus was trapped in it, like a fly caught in amber. I looked around the interior of the bus again. The passengers were still there, motionless. The woman who had been sleeping earlier was now wide awake, her eyes fixed on me. Her expression was blank, but I could sense a quiet understanding in her gaze, as if she knew exactly what was happening, but couldn't speak. The man across from me, his face still pale and sickly, finally moved. He turned his head toward me slowly, his eyes locking with mine. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze. It was fleeting, but it was there. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. He wasn't just another stranger on this bus. He had been here before. The woman in the back shifted, her head tilting slightly as she stared at the window, her lips parting to speak, but no sound came out. A strange sense of calm washed over me, despite the chaos and confusion spinning in my mind. I could feel it now. This wasn't just a bus ride. This wasn't just about getting from one place to another. No, this was something much bigger, something far more sinister. I turned to the driver, hoping to find some answers, but his face was still frozen, staring ahead, unmoving. He wasn't even blinking. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized the driver wasn't even alive. A sudden jolt ran through the bus, and I felt myself lurch forward in my seat. My heart was racing, but I couldn't scream. It was as if the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Every muscle in my body tensed, but I remained frozen, unable to move. And then, the figure outside the bus appeared again. But this time, it wasn't standing by the side of the road. It was standing right in front of us. The shadowy figure stood still, its form distorted and twisted, like it was composed of darkness itself, an entity that shouldn't exist in this reality. I could see nothing of its face, only the black void that consumed everything in its path. As the bus continued to move toward it, the figure's presence grew heavier, suffocating. I felt as though we were being drawn into it, like a moth to a flame. There was no escape. "Get off the bus," the woman's voice suddenly echoed through the silence. Her words were like a whisper, yet they were the clearest thing I had heard all night. "It's too late now." Her voice sounded distorted, as if it was coming from far away, yet somehow it reached me with a strange clarity. I turned to her, my mouth dry, but no words came out. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight, constricted. The man across from me leaned forward, his eyes wide, his lips moving soundlessly. It was as if he was trying to warn me, to tell me something important, but the words wouldn't come. I turned back to the window, and my eyes went wide in terror. The figure was gone, but in its place, something far worse had emerged. The empty void outside the bus had been replaced by a vast, endless landscape, a sprawling, barren wasteland of broken buildings, cracked roads, and long dead trees. There were no stars in the sky, no moon, just an oppressive, unnatural darkness. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was watch. The landscape stretched on without end. It was like we were in some kind of twisted limbo, a place that didn't belong to the real world, a place from which there was no return. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a bus ride. This was something far worse. I wasn't supposed to be here. I had been drawn into this nightmare, this parallel realm, a place between life and death. It was as if the bus had become a vessel, a transport to a world where time and space didn't exist. The passengers, the woman, the man, and the driver were all part of it. They had been here before. They were lost, just like me, trapped in this endless cycle, caught in this limbo with no way out. But they didn't seem to care anymore. They had accepted it. This place, this bus, was their reality now. I felt my mind begin to unravel. I had to get out. I had to escape. But then everything shifted. The bus lurched again, and I was thrown from my seat. The lights flickered wildly, plunging the bus into complete darkness. I could hear the faint sound of whispers, low, unintelligible murmurs coming from all around me. I was suffocating in this blackness, trapped in a place where I didn't belong. And then, suddenly, the lights came back on. We were back at the station. The bus had returned to where it all began. The familiar surroundings of the old, run-down station greeted me like a cruel joke. But as I looked around, something was different. The station was empty. There were no passengers, no buses, no sounds. It was just me, standing alone in the dead silence. I stumbled off the bus, my legs weak, my mind spinning. The night air was cold, biting at my skin, but I didn't care. I had to get out. I had to leave this place, this nightmare. But as I walked toward the exit, I saw it again. The shadowy figure standing in the distance. It was waiting for me, watching me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But as I took another step, I realized the truth. I was never meant to leave.